My guest on this edition of Life Stories is an award-winning filmmaker and photographer who arrived in Birmingham at the age of 5, having been born on the island of St Kitts in the Caribbean. As a photographer of over 30 years, Pogus Caesar has documented major events throughout the Midlands and is well known for his photographic records of Birmingham's black history and the Handsworth riots. His work has also taken him to foreign shores such as Latin America, Africa, India, Eastern Europe and the States. His photography represents the world at large with touching observations of events and humanity. It's a very warm welcome to Life Stories to Pogus Caesar.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, indeed. Welcome, Pogus. So you came to Birmingham at the age of 5 from St Kitts. Do you remember the move?
I do remember the move. I remember us getting on a little plane from St Kitts, and that took us to Barbados, getting on a boat to Barbados, and then travelling all the way through. And I remember Gibraltar, stopping off at Gibraltar, and then getting to, I think it might have been somewhere in England, I can't remember where it was.
Southampton.
It could have been Southampton. Yeah. And then catching the train all the way to Birmingham. It was the first time that I'd seen a television as well. And one very interesting point was there was a woman on the train who was actually eating these eggs. And she was eating these little raw eggs.
Raw eggs, not boiled eggs?
No, but what I didn't know, they were like chocolate eggs.
Oh,
because I'd never seen chocolate eggs in my life. And things like gas fires and open fires, and of course, England, was very, very cold and nothing like the Caribbean. But I think, for my parents and a lot of African Caribbeans, it was the land of milk and honey. It was the place that you kind of come to make as much as money of you could do, and then spend a few years and then return to the Caribbean. But we settled in Sparkbrook, educated in Sparkbrook, very, very multicultural area at that time.
May I ask you why your parents chose Birmingham? Did you have relations here?
There were relations who were here. There's a tendency for, especially kind of West Indians, to come to a place where the other West Indians are. And of course, there are very large rooming houses. So somebody would have a rooming house that they would renting a room from, and then you'd rent another room, and then within where we lived, there were about 6 or 7 different families. There were Irish families, there were families from Barbados, Nevis, there was Anguilla. And of course, because we never interacted with them in the Caribbean, I never interacted with people from Barbados in the Caribbean. So suddenly being in the same house with somebody from Barbados, because you couldn't understand what they were saying, because they tended to talk
different dialect?
Different kind of dialect. But it was an eye-opener, and I'm still here. But I do have fond memories of the Caribbean. But I'm glad that we moved here, because it has opened up a whole world of opportunities.
And have you been back to St Kitts?
Yes, I have been back to St Kitts and realised how small the place is. You can actually drive around it in about 45, 50 minutes. You actually go around and you meet yourself coming backwards. Yes.
So, and do you still have family there?
Absolutely, yes. But I don't think I would go back to live there, because it's just effectively just a little bit too small.
So was it a happy childhood, Pogus?
The childhood was happy. There were elements of racism, because at the time there was a lot of ignorance. There was the whole thing about the, gollywogs, and, there were black people with bones through their noses, in the school books, and kids used to bully you. We didn't really know what that was.
Were you bullied?
Yes, I was bullied, but that was just like a child thing. We didn't know what all the names were. People would call you this name or that name, and you just didn't know what they were. But it was just childhood.
But as far as you were concerned, it was kind of happening all around you, and
yes, it was.
It wasn't a deep issue. It was something or was it? It
was only the older West Indian boys who had been here maybe for a few years. If they heard, let's say, the white kids calling us names, they say, "Do you know what that means?" And then suddenly you realise that it was a very, degrading word to say.
But at school, you had your chums, you had your friends.
Of course.
And I know that that's where your artistic talent began to surface.
Yes.
And you drew cartoons of some of your friends.
Yes, I used to draw cartoons of friends and family on the back of old Christmas cards and old photographs. I'd find something a bit quirky about somebody. Somebody had big ears or, shiny teeth or long fingers. I'd draw the pictures, and of course people would laugh. And as you know, when people pay attention to your work, you go, hold on, that's actually, that's something, because the congratulations of it actually makes you think, well, there is something that you have. Of course, you don't know what it is because, again, most West Indian parents wanted their children to be doctors and dentists and brain surgeons and scientists and all of the other things which so many of us never became.
But you enjoyed the reaction you were getting to your art.
Absolutely.
And so when it came to leaving school, did you go to art school or what did you do after school?
After school, I went to a place called Brooklyn Technical College, which is up in Great Bar. And then I spent a little bit of time there, but I just wasn't too happy. So I went down to the Birmingham Mint, and I worked at the Birmingham Mint for a while as a die polisher, polishing African money. So we did that for a while. And then after that, my cousin and I, there were some jobs at the Holiday Inn, which is actually right next to Central. There were some jobs.
Oh, I know it well.
And myself and my cousin, we went there as dishwashers. And we kept saying to the chef, look, we can cook. Because, as young West Indians, you're taught to cook from a very early age. And we kept saying to him, we can cook, we can cook. And he wouldn't believe us. And something happened where I think there were a lot of people who needed cooking for one day. And he gave us an opportunity. And within about 4 or 5 months, we became chefs. So we became clog wearing, big hats, and, did that for a good few years.
What's your best dish? What's your...
Everything.
Oh, really? You're very versatile in the kitchen?
I'd like to think I'm very versatile. But there's nothing like a bowl of cornflakes at 11 o'clock at night with a spoonful of onion, slices of bananas,
Right. Moving on to your interest in art, then you took up a very specific, very particular type of art form with pointillism. Just tell us about that.
Pointillism. I was looking for something to do, but again, you never know what it is that you want to do. And I saw a documentary on a TV station, and it was about two artists, Pizarro and Seurat, and they both painted in dots. And I just became quite fascinated that they could build up these images with these tiny little dots, like thousands and thousands of dots. So immediately I went, that's what I want to do. So I couldn't afford brushes and paints, so I had some old fountain pens, or some my parents had kind of old fountain pens, platinums and Parker pens and Quink ink, the old Quink ink.
Oh, yes, I remember.
Yes, so I just started using them and just building up. Just started with one dot.
So it takes a long time, doesn't it? It's pointillism.
Pointillism,
Pointillism,
yes.
and you'd put all these dots.
And it just really kind of built up, a bit like newspaper print. And I just started working in that.
So I know that this became a big part of your life, and you went to New York and you tried an exhibition, but it didn't work. And you moved on then to something which has been a big, big part of your life, which is photography.
Absolutely.
And you had a simple camera, you took some pictures in New York, which ended up being exhibited in museums. And that's when you had a link to Channel 4 and your television career started?
I mean, just quickly, after being refused by a number of galleries in New York for the pointless work, I just took my Instamatic. It was a little Minolta Instamatic. And I just started taking photographs of the people in the surroundings within the 5 boroughs within New York. I then came back to England and printed some of them up. And I think through word of mouth, people started talking about this crazy guy, he thinks he can take photographs using a silly little camera. And lo and behold, it was somebody at Channel 4 got in touch with me, the news, and they did a little piece on my work. And then some curators got in touch with me, and I ended up exhibiting at your local E.M. Flint Gallery, the Warsaw Museum, the National Museum of Film and Photography in Bradford, and quite a number of other distinguished galleries around England.
It's amazing how quickly this happened, and it was then in the mid-80s that you photographed the Handsworth riots in Birmingham, and here's a picture on screen now of one of the incidents. In fact, this was you've told me, a crew car for Central Television. It was the news team going out to record the Handsworth riots, and I can see there's a pneumatic tape, television tape, to the left of that scene. I remember that story quite well. And you took that photograph and the rest that we'll see in a couple of minutes with a very simple camera. So these photographs got you on your way, and we'll hear more about how you worked on that sad event in Handsworth, but how it led to a career in television. So Pogus, we'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll continue the story of your career. Welcome back to Life Stories, where I'm in conversation with Birmingham-based award-winning photographer Pogus Caesar. Well, Pogus, we saw some pictures of the Handsworth riots before the break, and this is the camera you've got in front of us here that you took those photographs with. And the amazing thing is that over the years, that's the camera that you've used, isn't it?
This is the camera. This isn't the one. There's not the mistake that some people make. They think the camera that I used in New York was this one. But after New York, I realised that I needed to upgrade a little bit. So autofocus cameras were out then. So I spent a little bit of money, buying an autofocus. But I just didn't touch it for a while because I just kept it in the box, because it was the first shiny thing that I ever had. So when you're frightened to take it out of the box, which is what I did. But it really tested my mettle when the Handsworth riots, came on board. And this really showed me how, I suppose, kind of man and machine could really work together.
And how do you is there a secret of taking a good photograph? You've had all this success in photography.
There's no secret about taking photographs. I think it's about right place, right time. And, important thing is to have an interesting subject. And because you're using film, remember, I've only got 36 frames. With digital, you can shoot hundreds and hundreds of frames. So you have to wait for what you think is the right shot. And then the other problem that I have is that I can't access the print. Because with digital, you can immediately go into it and look. So I have to wait for that to finish, then take it to the lab, and then cross my fingers and hope they've come out. For every one photo, sometimes there's 2 or 3. The lighting's wrong, the film might have been contaminated. There's all kinds of things which can go wrong. So, not everything is all
obviously it's just a talent that you've got. And let's return and take a look and a recap of those pictures that you shot in 1985. Take a look at the screen now, Pogus, and just talk us through some of the pictures that you've got for us.
Well, this was taken during the Handsworth riots. This was taken on the 9th of September 1985. And as we all know, the Handsworth riots is a devastating event that happened in the inner cities of Birmingham, where the community and effectively the police, they came within combat within each other. A number of reasons kind of happened for that, and we can all go back. Is it unemployment, racism, lack of opportunities, the kind of that Thatcherism element, which is kind
Let's
of.
Let's move on to the next one. You were right. Obviously, you were right there. Were you in any danger at all during this?
I'll have to admit that
this time
your adrenaline's going, and that's the one thing. And it's also important when the community that you've grown up in, when it becomes inflamed and you have an opportunity to document it, because a lot of, let's say, the mainstream press, they would put a lot of kind of derogatory terms, like race riot, blacks, there were a lot of terms which were used. So I think myself and possibly other people wanted to just, have our own truth. And it was just about documenting, and, it took me years before I released any of these photographs.
And there's the picture again of the Central TV film crew car.
Yes, what had happened was that was a Central TV car, and you can see to the left the old pneumatic tape. And I mean, in a way, it looks like a Hollywood film still. It looks quite surreal when you look back at it. But it's something that I suppose I'll never forget.
That, in fact, was a stepping stone. I mean, a sad event, but it was a stepping stone for you to work in television.
Yes, it was at the time. Black on Black, which was made by LWT and put out on Channel 4. There's a guy called Trevor Phillips, who I'd known, who had bought some of my point list work from me. and he offered me a job as a line producer working for Black on Black. Then he wanted me to put together a little documentary about Handsworth and the riots. I put that together. Then Zia Moyedin, who was working for Here and Now at Central TV, saw the documentary, offered me a job as a presenter, and then I became a presenter on Here and Now. Then I became a newsreader. Then I became a producer.
On Central News?
Yeah, Central. Then I became a producer. Then I became a director. Then I became a series editor.
And then you worked for the BBC as well,
And then
didn't
the
you?
BBC in Oxford Road on, I think, called the A-Force. But you know, I was working abroad, like in Canada, with people like Isaac Hayes and Jada Pinkett Smith. And then in Italy with a lot of black footballers, people like George Weah. You know, it was about the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
And you've done a lot of work in the black community, looking at improving community relations and working on art as well, and film for from the black community.
Well, what I would say is that, I mean, a lot of the mainstay of the subject is black people, because I don't think there are enough quality images, you know, of what we grow up in. And one of the reasons is that my parents and a lot of other parents, they didn't document their lives. You know, you ask, you know, where's the photograph of my grandfather? I mean, I don't know what my grandfather looks like. You know, I don't know what my grandmother looks like. They talk about aunts and uncles, and where are they? And they're not there. So my thing was always to document. If you have the opportunity, just document, and not just people who are, you know, famous, but, you know, ordinary working people who are contributing in some way. And it's only maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years after, you know, after you've taken the photograph and you go through it, and then it becomes poignant. For me, it's never poignant at that moment. You know, you go back and you go, oh, this is what it's about. And you look and things like fashion, the situation, the roads are different, houses, cars, you know, the way that communities are. But I would always inspire, hopefully inspire anybody from whatever class, just document. You know, it's so important.
And it doesn't have to be an expensive camera.
No, it
as
doesn't.
You've showed us. Well, let's take a look at some more of
the
images that you've taken. Tell us about these ladies. They look very happy.
These are dinner ladies, and at the time I used to work at a place called Holyhead Road in Handsworth, Holyhead Road School. And I'm sure you know, when you work in environments, the people that you need to be friends with, security and the chefs.
And the chefs.
Always. And they treated us really, really well. You know, even when the canteen was closed down, we would go back and get a little bit of fudge from them, or a little bit of you know, apple crumble
Well, I was going
and
to
custard.
say crumbles or steamed sponge
Steamed
puddings and
sponges,
custard.
yes.
I know exactly.
And,
it's my sort of food.
And they would kind of just let me, you know, take photographs of them. You know.
That's a lovely photograph. Oh, goodness me.
Right, this is called Day Trip to the Black Country, and it was going to a wedding, and this little girl, she was running up and down the aisle, running
Yes.
back and forwards, you know, her little runway. And I think at one point I said, you know, you need to stop, because, you know, that noise, that pitter-patter, pitter-patter, pitter-patter. And she was running up and down. When she came back, she just pulled this face as though, you know, don't you tell me what to do, mister. And she just gave me the most fantastic expression.
Lovely. And this lady?
This is
nun?
called Bad Habit.
Yes.
And it's a photograph of somebody who was one thing, then became something else, and then became something else again.
And here?
This Pivot, A Stronger Pull, taken in Ladbroke Grove in London.
In London?
Yeah, I used to stay with their two African sisters, and they used to kind of let me stay with them when I was in London. And this photograph was taken very early in the morning, and as they were walking past the window, their silhouettes, you know, their hair would kind of bind in each other, and they did this kind of connection, and I said, just stop. And as they stopped, and I took the photograph, so I really, really enjoy that. And again, it's just about using the available light.
Let's take a look at another image of these children.
This is taken from the series Age. In the 1980s, I went to a school, Churchfield School in West Bromwich, and I'd been in contact with some of the teachers there. And what I wanted to do was to do a project, you know, the old school photos.
Yes.
And I wanted to just photograph the whole class. But I used all the walls and the environments as my backdrop, and I photographed every child in the class.
And moving on,
of course.
we also have some pictures of another big event that you covered?
This was the Birmingham tornado in 2005.
Briefly, because we haven't got much time.
Okay,
Just
I mean,
talk
how
us
that kind
through
of came through, I was just coming out of the car park on Alcester Road, and the sky went black. Then suddenly saw birds, oranges, toasters, bins flying up in the air, and then all this almighty crash. And then somebody said, you know, it's a tornado. So I always walk with my camera, you know, which is that. So I just parked my car up and just started to photograph like every road from King's Heath, walked all the way to Borsal Heath, Sparkbrook, and then kind of back again. And the interesting thing about the tornado is that nobody was seriously hurt, but it kind of cut a swathe through that kind of whole Moseley area. Because if you went onto Moseley Road, there was nothing that told you that there was a tornado just a few roads up.
Pogus, you capture situations and moods in a beautiful way.
Thank you.
So we'd like to wish you the very best in your future career and what's left to work on documentaries and TV. And we'll leave the programme through the final end credits with some of the famous people that you've met over the year. Thank you for telling us your life story.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.